Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation, real conversations with actionable insights into what consumers want and why. My name is Andrew McDougall and I'm a research director at Mintel, and I'm excited to bring you our latest installment chatting more with our lovely experts. And in such a feast of sport this summer, I thought today's episode would be really good to focus on the Euros 2024, which is, of course, the football or soccer championships that are occurring right now in Europe. And having a look at rather not the football, which as a proud Scotsman, I'm happy to not talk about, but actually rather look at the ripple effects it has on consumer habits across Europe today. And joining me are two very distinguished analysts in the travel and leisure sector that we have at Mintel. First up, we have Paul Davies, the Category Director for Technology and Consumer Leisure Habits. And he's going to be providing those insights into how Brits are gearing up for these championships and how they're coping during these championships as well. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Andy.
And joining us as well to give us a German perspective also as the host nation is Silvia Hondt, the Senior Research Analyst for Travel and Leisure in Germany. And she will be sharing her observations on how German consumers are reacting to this major event as well. So welcome, Silvia. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi.
So I guess, first of all, as I say, we're not going to focus on the football specifically. This is much more about the consumer behaviour. But what kind of general trends are you observing in consumer behaviour as we sort of in the lead up to the championships, but also now as the championships are underway? What kind of trends do we see in consumer behaviour for not just the Euros, but for sporting events in general? I mean, how does this excitement compare to previous sort of tournaments and events?
Yeah, I think I can take that one. I think you've hit the nail on the head, actually, with the word excitement there. I think that is the overarching trend. I think people are just so excited, going into the summer where you've got better weather. It's this time of year where everyone's always, so kind of looking forward to the months ahead and the warmer temperatures and getting out and experiencing the live sport, of course, whether it be at the stadiums or in the pubs or at home with friends and family. Our research shows that 51% of British consumers were actually looking forward to watching these Euros. So, yeah, half aren't. You can look at it either way, but that's still kind of over 30 million people. That's a hell of a lot of people that are excited. And I can't really think of an event that actually brings so many people together and has an impact on so many industries as major football. I mean, you could possibly say Taylor Swift's concert tour at the moment is up there. Apparently that's bringing £1 billion into the economy, but there's nothing like international football tournaments for bringing people together, but also impacting so many different sectors. I think the majority of sectors are influenced by you've got retail, technology, leisure, travel, food service, food and drink. Pretty much every sector will see a benefit from it. But this time around, I really think there is more excitement compared to previous tournaments. I mean, if you look back, the last major men's international football tournament was in Qatar in the winter 18 months ago. Plenty of controversy surrounding the tournament. Not many fans able or willing to travel to games. And just being in the winter just before Christmas wasn't as great for hospitality either. 2 years before that, you had the Euros, which were kind of heavily impacted by COVID, so half full or empty stadiums, a lot of people not feeling comfortable going to the pub either. And then you had the Russia World Cup 2 years before that, with sort of similar issues to Qatar in terms of fans travelling to stadiums and getting there, and slightly awkward kickoff times compared to what we've got now as well. And also, I mean, you mentioned your own team, Scotland, at the start. Scotland weren't even, didn't qualify for either of those two World Cups. They were here this time around in the first game, and plenty of excitement. In fact, 23% of Scottish residents actually felt that Scotland were going to win these Euros. So, at the time of recording, we know that hasn't been the case, unfortunately. Jumped up to 35% for England, who were the bookmakers' favourites. There's so much hype, so much expectation going into this tournament in particular, but I'm sure nothing compared to what we're seeing in Germany, where Silvia is, with obviously being the host nation.
Well, it hurts that you brought up Scotland there, and the fact that at time of recording we are currently out of the tournament anyway. Even worse now that I now have to turn to a German colleague who handed out that humiliation on day one. But Silvia, from the German perspective, how are we seeing consumer behaviour sort of adapt, and how are fans sort of preparing to watch the games? Are there any unique cultural factors that are influencing their behaviour?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I can only agree to what Paul said. So excitement is very high in Germany, of course. But I also agree to that 50-50 split. So we also have, of course, people who are not following the championship, and I think we shouldn't forget about them. But anyways, excitement is pretty high, and everyone's happy to watch the games outdoors, particularly now with summer finally kicking in Germany. So I think the weather is really kicking excitement even further. So talking about preparation, I think we have to consider how people are watching the games when talking about preparation, because I think compared to the UK, it's a bit different in Germany because we don't have this pop culture that much. So we have a lot of watching the games outdoors, which in Germany means public viewing. I think you don't say that in English, but we call it public viewing. So it's more like a public screening event where a lot of people are watching that. Particularly Berlin is known for that. Large events at the Brandenburger Tor. So I think a lot of people are searching for those events outdoors. And also, of course, particularly in the south of Germany, all the beer gardens that show the matches as well. So I think all around those outdoor watching is pretty popular in Germany. At the same time, of course, watching it at home is popular as well. So I think particularly food service brand and food and drink brands can benefit from that, as people are ordering shareable food platters, for example, to eat during the event, and also go to the supermarkets to buy snacks and beer, of course, and other drinks for watching during the match. And we, of course, also see that a lot of food and drink brands are promoting their products during those events as well. So I think, that are the major topics, how Germans are preparing for the game.
And you both mentioned there obviously a whole host of different categories that are massively impacted and can really see the opportunities in sporting events such as this Euros. And I know that also that both of you are sort of quite expert in the sort of travel and hospitality industries as well, with sort of the reports that you publish. But how is the kind of travel industry in your respective countries reacting to the increased demand for travel? So I guess in Germany, it's sort of to the stadiums and to the host cities. And I guess for the UK as well, it's the travel to Germany or in watching the games at home or in pubs. I mean, what strategies are companies employing to capitalize on this surge? I think I'll go to you first, Silvia, as the host nation.
Yeah. As you mentioned it. I mean, the matches are hosted across Germany. So we have, I think, 10 different cities where the matches are happening. So of course, there's a lot of travel to the stadiums throughout Germany. And particularly the German train provider can benefit from that, which is the Deutsche Bahn. And I think they had several campaigns around the Euro. So they are partnering with the Euro as well. So of course the Euro wants to host a very sustainable event as well. So I think this is an important topic for the UEFA as well. So traveling by train is pretty much one element of the whole tournament, I think. At the same time, they try to apply a strategy that keeps those consumers engaged even beyond the Euro. So they, for example, very much promoted their loyalty programs as well. So I think they really try to get consumers involved even beyond the Euros. And maybe above that, also, of course, the cities where the events are hosted can benefit the most. So I think this is worth mentioning as well, because, of course, not every city and every hotel in Germany can benefit from the Euros. And what I thought was really interesting is that we saw a few hotels that are not located or not close to those host cities that promoted a sweet escape from the Euros to also engage those who are not planning to watch the Euros and who just want some quiet time off. And also, I know that some restaurants are promoting not to show the Euros, to offer quiet places within busy cities, which I thought was very interesting too. So we are seeing actually both sides, which I think, is pretty interesting.
I love that as well, actually. I like, because we do forget there are these kind of anti-trends of actually, you know what, I want to switch off. I don't want to be involved in that. So I guess there's interesting ways that brands and companies can sort of appeal to both audiences. I mean, Paul, from the UK side of things, I guess England, obviously, and Scotland as well had a couple of games of the previous Euros back in 2021, and so they have had that host environment around them. But for this time round, how are we seeing sort of travel and hospitality impacted, and how is consumer behaviour different? Obviously, are they in terms of travelling to Germany, or indeed, as we mentioned, going to pubs or staying at home to watch the games? What kind of strategies are you seeing in the UK to capitalise on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the impact directly on the travel industry isn't quite what we're seeing in Germany, but we're still seeing around 500,000 Brits are expected to travel over to Germany for games. I think that the Tartan Army have been quite famous over there. Hopefully Silvia's not sick of the sound of bagpipes already, but even though Scotland sadly exited at the group stage, sorry to remind you about that, Andy. They've had quite a significant. Their fans have had a significant influence on the tournament, and they've been greeted well everywhere. So you still have good trade in terms of the number of fans travelling over to Germany for games, and that's obviously continuing into the knockout stages now. But here in the UK, I mean, our research shows that about 1 in 6 consumers were planning to head to the pub for one or more games. So we know that the hospitality industry always sees a massive benefit from an international football tournament taking place. I think there's estimates saying that they expect 20 million pints extra to be sold during the tournament, during the 4 weeks of the tournament. We're seeing plenty of pubs and bar chains kind of offer party packages or packages of food and drink to enjoy within the game. So Green King, for instance, is encouraging people to pre-order sharing dishes like nachos and chicken wings and beers, of course, and things like that. So we're still seeing that there's a really strong uplift for the hospitality industry, and that pub going is still popular. I think the most significant or the most interesting change that we're noticing over time is that it's not necessarily dominated by alcohol. Obviously, so we see that more than half of people that plan to watch games will, buy alcohol in or buy alcohol at the pub to enjoy with the games. But increasingly, we're seeing that, driven by young people and by more women getting into the games, that they are the most likely to buy food in. So whether it be from takeaway and delivery restaurants or whether it be from supermarkets, we're seeing that there's kind of a rise in interest in buying sort of themed food in, or food to enjoy with the games rather than it all being centered around alcohol.
It seems to be this kind of positive sort of feeling around not just the Euros, but around these kind of sporting events, kind of celebrating your nation, being proud, and also just enjoying, sort of bringing. So I guess wider trends as well of sort of bringing people together. And you mentioned there about the sort of the low or no alcohol trends that we're seeing on a much wider base globally anyway. So interesting as well that that's impacting with regards to sort of sporting events like football, which may always have had that connection with sort of going and having a beer at the pub and things. If I know earlier as well, Paul, you mentioned other categories such as sort of tech and retail as well. So if we were to sort of switch tactics slightly, switch direction, and just talk about technology and retail, are we seeing right now a spike in, for example, the purchase of new TVs or home entertainment systems? Does that get impacted by events like this? Are we seeing that sort of in anticipation of the games?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this personally resonates with me because my first job was actually within the televisions industry, and this is well over a decade ago, and it was massive. These events were massive back then for the for electronic retailers and manufacturers, and it's still massive now. In fact, this week we saw AO.com has reported a 54% increase in television sales compared to the same month a year ago. So even though we know that people are upgrading their TVs less often than in the past, it's still a really massive boost for that industry. And in fact, our research as well showed that 1 in 4 Brits were planning to upgrade their TV for either the Euros or the Olympics this year. It's still a big one for sort of bringing forward upgrades of audio-visual products. We also see a huge boost in terms of sectors like gambling. So, in the last World Cup, for instance, there was I think it was Entain, one of the leading gambling operators here in the UK. They noticed around a 15% increase in the number of customers over that time of year compared to a normal period. So it brings in those sort of casual fans that want to have a sort of a light flutter on the winner of the tournament or a particular game. And there's so many offers and promotions to get people to gamble on the games. And retail as well. I mean, it's not my direct area, but speaking to our retail team, I know that we always see convenience stores do particularly well in this time of year because people will go out and panic buy half an hour before the game when they realise that they want to get some drinks and they want to get snacks in to enjoy with the game. And a really interesting initiative we saw this time around actually was Tesco. So obviously Tesco, whilst it does operate within the convenience sector as well, they kind of really wanted to rival smaller convenience stores and off licenses and things like that. And they launched the Whoosh, I believe it's called, the delivery service that will get snacks and drinks and things like that delivered within 20 minutes. So kind of like rivaling sort of delivery and things like that as well. So big benefits across retail and technology as well.
Yeah, it's a big boost, I think, obviously, for those kind of delivery companies. And Silvia, I wanted to bring you in now as well, because I was going to ask, actually, is it the same thing that we're seeing in Germany, or is it slightly different? Or have you noticed any sort of specific promotions or campaigns from retailers that are sort of really capitalizing on these championships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's to some extent the same. So we are also talking about TVs again. I think we're also seeing a peak in TV purchases as well. But I've talked to our tech analyst before, and we have also seen a drop in the first months of the year. So it's kind of also a shift. So people are pre or postponing their purchases as well. And in Germany, we also saw a peak during COVID-19. So I think it's not as big as it was in other years this year, but still, of course, it is a peak in TV purchases and tech, obviously. At the same time, we are still in the middle of the financial crisis, so I think a lot of consumers are still struggling to pay for those larger investments. So I think this also pays into this. But of course, it is a massive opportunity to engage with consumers for tech retailers and retailers in general. And we also saw a lot of campaigns around that topic. For example, MediaMarkt Saturn is like the biggest retailer in Germany, and they had several campaigns in place, particularly about making the home the fan zone, because most people are still watching at home. So they focused on that this is actually, the home is the actual real fan zone and the real stand, because most are not in the stadium in the end. And also they had quite an interesting B2B campaign, as I said, a lot of public viewing that we have in Germany. So they also offered rentable equipment for beer gardens and restaurants, which I found pretty interesting as well. And talking about tech, I know that Hisense is one of the main sponsors as well. So they are promoting their TVs as a perfect match for watching football with sharp images and good sound and everything like that. And also I saw another interesting example from Telekom. They promoted their emerging tech in fan zones, such as VR headsets and things like that, which is quite interesting because most people can't really afford those things, but still they are interested to try those things. So I think they really used that opportunity to show what emerging tech they are seeing as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it is that some of the sort of tests that companies are doing to try and sort of enhance that viewing experience and that user experience. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting actually that you mentioned obviously the financial crisis, the cost of living crisis that we're kind of going through, particularly in Europe as well. Interesting that you mentioned that because it's not easy. It's not different. Well, it's not easy to ignore that it's going to impact people. So for sporting events like the Euros, like the Olympics that are going to come up, does that provide like an escape from that for a moment? Or it's interesting you mentioned about sort of renting and obviously people staying at home and still having that social experience, but maybe doing more so at home than maybe going out and spending more money. Is the kind of the financial constraints or the worries or the slight anxiety, is that impacting consumer behavior during these kind of championships as well?
I'd say yes. So we also focused on in our reports closer, the general mood is not really changing. While I'd say yes. So we also focused on in our reports escape, as you said, but it's not really a long-term. I think those effects are kind of limited, even though it is a sweet escape and it's very nice to experience all the excitement and everything. But I think it won't wipe away all the worries that people are still facing. Very nice.
Yeah, Paul, I wanted to bring you in on this as well. This idea of that, as you say, Silvia, that kind of sweet escape is kind of football and sporting events. Obviously, can give you those highs and those lows. It kind of energizes audiences, even if it is for that small period of time. But are there any sort of opportunities that you find that are promising potentially for brands looking to engage with these kind of very focused, energized audiences? Are there any sort of examples of successful campaigns from tournaments that we could look to emulate or engage with those consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you're both saying there. Football and sport in general definitely provides consumers with that temporary escape from the kind of harsh reality of what we've been through over the last few years. And we've seen like brands like really play up to that around the tournament particularly in terms of running sort of, patriotic campaigns. So we've seen Adidas with their Jude Bellingham campaign here in England, at least, kind of really trying to sort of bring the hype to him in particular into England. We've also seen on the flip side, we've seen like Paddy Power, for instance, a leading bookmaker, kind of mock England's favourites tag and try and sort of dampen that enthusiasm in a kind of humorous, kind of comical way, which I think resonates as well. But I always think one of the big opportunities missed is kind of, you mentioned those like emotional highs and lows, and there's there's probably no country quite like England for kind of giving that, having so much expectation and build up, and then kind of crashing back. Once you sort of crash out the tournament, sort of absolutely lambasting the team and everything. And I think there's a lot of this really kind of came to light in the last Euros tournament in the final with. Obviously going out on a penalty shootout like England normally do, but then obviously the players that miss penalties kind of receive like really harsh and unfair abuse. And I think we often see brands kind of do so much in the lead up to these tournaments and during the tournaments, but when if you do have an emotional low, which sadly as England fans, Scotland fans, we often do. I think if they can really kind of react to that quickly and align and show solidarity with the affected players, with the team, I think that would really resonate with a lot of fans, and kind of just showing that they're not only there for the good moments, but actually they kind of back the team, back the players throughout. And I think that might be a missed opportunity. I think if brands could, sadly, the reality is for England fans, we probably do have to prepare for that eventuality. But I think that could be an opportunity for brands to kind of react to that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, because you always just think of the highs, the hype, it's that excitement. But yeah, there is the whole sort of relationship with the highs that obviously comes the lows. So it's an interesting sort of concept to think about that. Silvia, how important do you think it is for brands to align their messaging with those highs and lows then? Is it different from your perspective? Is it different from a German perspective, or?
I'd say, so first of all, I think Germans are a bit more pessimistic about the outcome. I think when we ask how many people think Germany will win, it was below 20%. So I think around 18 or something like that. So
less than Scotland then, less than Scotland. Yes. Okay, yes. just for some context there.
Yes. So yeah, I think, like I said, Germans are a bit pessimistic, and definitely I agree that it is important to align your messaging around the tournament and around how the tournament is evolving, because you can't really, post on social media a celebrating image if the country you're standing for just lost. So of course that doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, I think emotions being like one key part of the tournament and of football, of course. I think those emotions are not only built through those highs and lows, but also through, for example, socializing. So I think all the social aspects are also something that brands can align with. Paul, you mentioned that we've seen all the Scottish fans celebrating in all the other countries as well, celebrating in Germany. And I think this is something that a lot of people really like to see. And it's like this communal spirit that brands can align with as well. So it's not only the highs and lows of the own team, but also this international feeling, this European feeling that you can really sense in Germany at the moment. And I think particularly in this year, this is a very important topic as well. So it's not only your own team and the highs and lows of your own team, but also everything that goes around those matches as well.
I think just to carry on from that as well, there is a kind of unique opportunity this summer for brands to kind of continue the momentum on, because 2 weeks after the Euros finish, you've got the Olympics starting. So, if brands were sort of brave enough to, get players to literally pass the baton on to, excuse the pun, to the, in our case, the Team GB team, they can really kind of extend that summer of sport. And, whether England or Scotland, well, we know the Scottish team haven't been successful, but if the England team is successful or not, they can literally pass that baton on to Team GB, who can hopefully either continue that success or be more successful in Paris 2 weeks later. So, real opportunity for brands to kind of carry it on throughout the summer.
And you've both mentioned sort of different campaigns and different ways that, whether it's through fun or information, but you've mentioned sort of brands and companies that are looking to engage effectively with people during this tournament. And obviously it's interesting what you say about trying to get that to continue into the Olympics, because that is almost a natural progression. But what role do you think, because some of those, Paddy Power, you mentioned, are very active on social media, but what role does social media play for brands in engaging fans and people during sporting events like the Euros? And how can brands leverage that much more effectively, or are there brands that are setting the standard for that?
I think social media plays a massive role now, and it's getting bigger and bigger every tournament. I mean, if you look at how fans plan to follow the Euros, of course, consumers of all ages are really into the tournament and looking forward to watching the games, but actually older consumers are much more likely to watch the games via linear TV and be less likely to engage on social media or online, whereas younger fans are, obviously much more likely to be following the events on social media and online. So I think traditionally, you would have seen all the major ads that we're seeing on TV might just have been shown through via that medium, whereas now they're all being shown online on YouTube, on online video ads through platforms like X and Facebook. So obviously that's one way they can engage. But I think you do see certain brands. Specsavers are always one for, obviously their line should have gone to Specsavers, but they'll kind of every time something goes wrong for someone in the Euros, they'll seem to be popping up and be very active on X with that. We saw a nice example from Aldi recently, Aldi, the supermarket chain, where we saw a picture of Gareth Southgate and his notepad during a game, and they put that alongside a picture of a shopping list and said, when you've got to be manager of an international football tournament, of an international football team, and do your big shop at the same time. So there's brands that are sort of giving that humorous take, and that's obviously what people are more likely to respond to and repost and like online. I think it is just becoming an increasingly important channel with every tournament that goes now, for sure.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, I think from a team's perspective as well, social media really helps to create those stars and to help consumers identify with those people who are on that team, which I think is pretty important for the whole tournament and for also brand campaigns as well. Because you can also show behind the scene content, how is the team preparing for the matches, which I think is pretty interesting for all the social media users. So I think this is a good opportunity as well to engage fans more strongly and to really make this connection to the fan as well.
And so I guess a sort of final question on that, because we kind of touched upon obviously that progression into the Olympics and things as well. So all that engagement that we're talking about here and all those kind of strategies that we're seeing put in place now, are there any sort of particular segments that brands should be focusing on more intensely than that we've seen maybe in these championships, but also for sporting events in general and sort of similar type of events in terms of enhancing and engaging consumer behavior? Are there any sort of particular things that you've seen stand out and would say are the opportunities for things like sporting events?
I mean, the typical audience for the men's Euros in particular, as you'd expect, it's still men. It's predominantly men aged 45 to 64 that watch the games, but men of all ages follow it by some means. But increasingly, we're seeing young women. So it's now around 1 in 3 women aged 16 to 24 that are interested in the men's Euros. So it is a much kind of wider demographic that has been in the past. That gender gap is narrowing. And it is also affluent consumers are more likely to be engaged in the tournament. So that's why we see, it's a really good opportunity for premium brands to align themselves with the team, with the tournament. So for instance, you'll see M&S, who have been like the men's team, like official clothing partner with, Gareth Southgate in his waistcoats and all that down the years, that have become quite famous. So they've, done well to really closely associate themselves with that and sort of, stay in the public eye that way.
Silvia, do you see similar then in Germany? Are you seeing sort of these opportunities to sort of capitalize on sporting events like this? And what would you say are the best ways that you're seeing to engage going forward?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, getting women more involved in sports, I think is a major opportunity as well in Germany. And we've seen that actually for the German team. I don't know if you know the away kit from the German team, which is pink, and Adidas launched a pretty good campaign on that, and it was actually the best sold away kit ever. So I think it shows like how high the demand is for a more modern football, for a more open football that includes like different target groups. And as Paul said, so far it was mostly in Germany, mostly younger men, but still, very man focused so far. And I think this is a very good opportunity for brands to capitalize on that. And I know that there's also an example from Heineken. They had a really nice campaign. I think it was prominent in the UK as well. It was during, I think in 2022, during the championships for women and men, and also during the women European Football Championship, I think. And they showed that campaign that involved women watching sports. And I think the end slogan they had was, it was like trying to engage women more and say cheers to all fans, men included. And I thought all those campaigns around that are pretty prominent at the moment.
Yeah, it seems to be a good progression that we're seeing being made now with sort of bringing people closer together. And I think it's definitely something that from what you've both said about sort of the socializing, the elements of community building and connecting and escapism during a tough time as well. I mean, as you say, these sporting events are sometimes fleeting, and whoever ends up winning this tournament, it'll be fantastic for them, but then it'll be on to the next at some point. So these are very fleeting moments, but the lasting impacts that they can have on consumers and helping them feel good and just lifting mood seems to be a really important thing. So thank you both for joining me with this conversation today. As I say, at time of recording, England and Germany could meet in the final, so the two of you may or may not be talking in a couple of weeks' time. But thank you so much, Paul, and thank you, Silvia, for joining me today. I've had a really fascinating chat, and it's been amazing to sort of see how sporting events like this and like the Olympics coming up are really important in how it impacts consumer behavior. And it's amazing to see how so many different sectors are impacted by this. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And thank you, Silvia, for joining me today.
Thanks, Andrew, for having us.
And thank you very much for listening as well. But the conversation doesn't end here. If you head over to Mintel's LinkedIn and Instagram, you can let us know what you think. Please leave your comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Euros 2024, maybe not just predictions, but also just any sort of examples that you're seeing on how consumer behavior is influenced. Of course, it doesn't limit just to Euros either. If you can talk about any sporting event and anything you're seeing, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your insights on this as well. If you want to know more about Mintel, then please visit Mintel.com and you can sign up to become a member of the free Mintel Spotlight community. And you can also make sure you never miss an episode again by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. But once again, a big thank you very much to Paul and Silvia for joining me today on this conversation. And thank you for listening. So goodbye for now, and we'll catch you next time for a new episode of Little Conversation.